Good evening. It's time for the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, and welcome. We certainly have a number of things to talk about, and as far as if you ever want additional weather information, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska. We have all sorts of information available online. And if you want a recorded phone forecast, you can go through the maze at 1-800-472-0391. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, things you wish to share, pictures, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Well, let's start out with fire danger because we've seen an increase in a number of wildfires across the state, but the highest fire danger has been along the Yukon River and up toward the Porcupine River there toward the Yukon Flats, where we see high to even extreme fire danger, and also a little pocket out there east of the Seward Peninsula. And we had one of the more significant wildfires that are currently underway is the Haystack Fire has consumed thus far over 800 acres and 22 structures, and firefighters continue to work on trying to contain that blaze. But if you have any plans to be heading out this weekend doing camping or thinking about any outdoor burning, be especially careful, especially there in east central areas of the state where it has been warm and dry. Many temperatures have been in the 70s and 80s. And not much in the way of rain other than some scattered shower isolated thunderstorms that pop up from time to time. But again, it's lightning strikes are one of the leading cause of wildfires across the country. Well, taking a look at the satellite imagery, we have a ridge of high pressure in place over the northern half of the state into northwest Canada. In the past couple of days, we have watched since earlier in the week a couple of waves that have worked their way from around Juneau, Yakutat, and then westward across south central and now into southwest parts of the state, and some of that moisture has made it all the way up there into at least the mid-Yukon Valley and producing scattered showers and isolated storms. Meanwhile, there continues to be low pressure circulation there down just south of the Gulf of Alaska and North Pacific. Another one, actually a couple south of the Aleutian Chain and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And we're going to talk about a bit of a pattern change that may be shaping up here for next week that could have some ramifications toward cooler and wetter weather, especially for south central and southwest parts of the state. Otherwise, as we head back up toward the north, along the Arctic coast, they've seen at least temperatures warm this week, but out over the ice, there's still some areas of fog, and then where we have the openings in the ice, in the Chukchi Sea, there has been some fog develop out there and also down toward St. Lawrence Island. But again, main weather feature we're watching here is the cloud cover over the southern half of the state, kind of retrograding back toward the west. Its ridge of high pressure remains anchored at least for another day over the northern half of the state into northwest Canada. Eventually, though, that high is going to begin to break down as low pressure takes over across the Bering and Aleutians, and then we start to see a southerly flow develop from the North Pacific and the Gulf of Alaska that would impact southwest and south central parts of the state as we head through the late weekend and especially early and middle part of next week. So in today's weather map, typical what we call thermal lows that just kind of set up in the warmer Yukon Valley, extending into northwest Canada. Along and south of this feature, we see scattered showers, isolated storms. There is a weak low pressure circulation that is southeast of Kodiak Island, kind of there just entering the Gulf of Alaska, but that's has a tendency to be in the process of weakening. Meanwhile, weak high pressure out over the North Bering there near St. Lawrence Island, and of course, whenever you have a weak high like that, the marine layer traps that moisture, keeps some low cloudiness and areas of fog or some sprinkles or patchy drizzle going. A little more substantial low there south of the central Aleutians, a 986 low there in the North Pacific. With weak ridge of high pressure continuing along coastal areas of the southeast panhandle into south central Alaska, but it remains what we call kind of a dirty ridge because there's the marine moisture trapped beneath it there, especially across the southeast areas. So as we head through tonight, we'll expect low pressure there just to continue to sit, maybe retrograde a bit back toward the northwest across the interior of the state. And otherwise just a couple of troughs of low pressure rotating back toward the northwest there up in the Gulf of Alaska, and high pressure continuing over the North Bering all the way up into the Arctic Ocean north of the Canadian Arctic coast. So on Friday, we'll continue to see weak low pressure from northwest Alaska right along the south slopes of the western portion of the Brooks Range down toward the Alcan border, with the potential for scattered showers and isolated storms. Continuing, weak ridge of high pressure remains from south central areas around Prince William Sound back across the southeast inner waterways, but again, moisture will be trapped beneath that. But notice the low pressure. There's one area of low pressure there now just approaching the southern part of the Gulf of Alaska, and we're going to see low pressure get a little better organized heading into Saturday. They're south of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. That feature is going to begin to lift northeastward as we continue to see the thermal troughs kind of cutting right across through the heart of the Yukon Valley, with scattered showers and isolated storms continuing. And then back out toward the western and central Aleutians is another stronger area of low pressure. And eventually the pattern change that'll come about will cause a southerly flow of air early and middle part of next week across the Alaska Peninsula through Kodiak Island, the Kenai up into south central areas. And this could end up becoming a wetter and cooler pattern for the southwestern half of the state. We'll show you that in the temperature and precipitation outlook then coming up for next week. Low temperatures will be down into the upper 40s rather, to around 50 degrees across the southeast inner waterways back through the south central areas. And then high temperatures, generally upper 50s to mid 60s, could get up to 64 at Juneau, 65 at Haines, 72 though at Talkeetna, 73 at McGrath, whereas readings may approach 60 along the Kenai coast. And then as we go into Saturday morning, lows will generally be again in mid 40s to around 50 degrees. And high temperatures Saturday should be back up mid-upper 60s across the southeast. Maybe a little bit of sun, one of the drier days you're going to see, so get out and enjoy that if you're there in the Panhandle. Up across the interior of south central areas, we're looking at readings at least back up into the 70s in some areas. And it should generally get back up around or a tad above 60 in the Kenai and extending down along the Alaska Peninsula. Low temperatures Friday morning will be generally above freezing along the Arctic coast, and upper 40s, lower 50s through the Yukon Valley. High temperatures Friday along the Yukon River will be in the 70s to even lower 80s up there at Fort Yukon. Otherwise, highs 40s to around 50 along the Arctic coast, with locally warmer values there along the North Slope. And the Seward Peninsula should see coastal highs in the 40s, but getting up to about 63 at Nome. And then for Saturday morning, we'll see lows low to mid 30s along the Arctic coast, but generally around or just above 50 through the Yukon Valley, and 30s and 40s across the Seward Peninsula. Temperatures Saturday afternoon should reach the 70s in many areas, with again up around 82 or so at Fort Yukon, even 67 all the way up to Nome. And finally, southwest areas. Friday morning lows will generally be in the mid 40s to around 50 degrees, though cooler readings along the west coast and up there 36 there, St. Lawrence Island, and then extending out into the Aleutian Chain, lows in the lower 40s. High temperatures Friday afternoon back up into the 60s and 70s through the lower Kuskokwim and Yukon river basins, and temperatures along the Aleutian Chain around 50 degrees for highs. Lows Saturday morning will generally be in the upper 40s to lower 50s across the interior of the Southwest. Extending out along the Alaska Peninsula, they'll be in the mid to upper 40s and lower 40s in the Aleutians. And then for Saturday afternoon, we are looking for temperatures to be rather warm there from Nome on up over in through the Yukon Valley and upper Kuskokwim. We'll see temperatures likely break 70 degrees, with coolest readings remaining in the 50s along the Alaska Peninsula and generally only near 50 out across the Aleutians. So here's kind of some interesting things to look at, and this trend continues. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for June 23rd through the 27th, and it is showing the potential for below normal temperatures over south central areas, including the Kenai, Anchorage, down through Kodiak and the southwest peninsula. Meanwhile, the far west around Norton Sound and the Seward Peninsula could see temperatures average above normal, as well as the northern half of the state. And then even the southeast could be a little above normal, but the area to focus on is south central areas and the southwest, because if we develop this anticipated flow of southerly moisture that may come up early middle part of next week, that could mean some more substantial rains, especially to the Kenai and Kodiak Island, and that would bring definitely some cooler temperatures and above normal rainfall for those areas, especially for people considering fishing on some of those coastal streams. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, we continue to head. We're just days away now from the summer solstice.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, in your flying weather, the weekend is almost here, and if you are planning a flight Friday into Saturday, this is the way things are shaking out. We continue to see IFR conditions over the bodies of water, whether it be the Gulf of Alaska, North Pacific, much of the Bering, and up there along the Chukchi Sea and Arctic Ocean. And interior, though, we'll see a lot of VFR conditions prevailing yet. By Friday afternoon, we'll have to watch for the potential for some isolated to scattered thunderstorms to develop, especially the south slopes of the Brook Range along north of the Yukon River, extending eastward to east of Fairbanks, and then along especially the south side of the Alaska Range eastward. There could be a few isolated storms. Otherwise, IFR conditions confined to just off the northwest coast and off of St. Lawrence Island and much of the central western Bering. Saturday morning, generally VFR conditions across much of the state, especially the interior. There's an area of IFR conditions, though, east end of Kodiak Island lifting northward with a bit of a frontal wave, as there is going to be an area of low pressure by Sunday move its way on up to just east-southeast of Kodiak Island, bringing in additional moisture into south central areas. But still, Saturday, you can start to see the influence of that in the Gulf. As that moisture lifts northward, we'll see IFR conditions from the east side of the Kenai down throughout much of the Gulf. IFR also continuing along the Arctic coast, northwest coast, and then back out across most of the Bering, including the Aleutian chain. So, past conditions on Friday. AKwx should generally have VFR conditions, though an isolated thunderstorm could develop, especially from there southward during the afternoon. That'll also be the case at Adigan, with perhaps an isolated storm developing in that area for Friday afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill will see MVFR conditions become VFR. And Rainy Pass should generally enjoy VFR conditions. Can't rule out, though, an isolated shower thunderstorm popping up there or around Windy Pass as we head through the afternoon on Friday. Though a better chance at Isabel Pass, the north entrance, and especially flying north and northeast of Isabel. Same thing for Metasta. There could be an isolated thunderstorm around the north entrance, but a better chance of isolated scatters storms the farther north and northeast you fly. Down toward Tanita, MVFR conditions becoming VFR for the daytime, midday into the afternoon. And same thing at Portage, maybe a little MVFR there in the morning, but becoming VFR. And then finally for the southeast panhandle, the northern extent there around Chilkoot and White Passes, MVFR conditions are expected throughout the day on Friday. Freezing levels, well, we continue to have the influence of that big area, mid and upper level high pressure over the northern half of the state into northwest Canada. Freezing levels could be a bit above 10,000 feet there in northwest Canada, and generally above 8,000 feet across the northern half of the state. Southern parts of the southeast panhandle could be at or below 6,000, as well as portions of the southwest, Alaska Peninsula, and Kodiak Island, before coming back up to around or a bit above 8,000 feet along the central and eastern Aleutians. And then icing potential will generally be above 10,000 feet across the entire area, including parts of the southern southeast around Ketchikan, as well as Kodiak Island in the southwest, Alaska Peninsula, parts of the interior. Just keep that in mind. There could be some isolated showers and storms developing there for the afternoon hours, and then back out over the western Bering. So the jet stream level winds 30,000 feet coming from the southeast in through south central areas of 30 to maybe 50 knots. More importantly, we have northwest winds, 110 knot jet max there, exiting the southern portion of the southeast panhandle into British Columbia. Backside of a weak low circulation, northwest winds 65 knots there at the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and generally some sort of westerly component to the winds, upwards to 65 to 70 knots there in the western half of the Aleutians. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, this is where the mid-level high pressure is, so not a whole lot of wind across the interior, though onshore flow from the southeast to 35 knots, the Kenai down toward Kodiak Island. And then as we get down to the 3,000 foot level, still some winds out of the southeast there, upwards to 35 knots toward the mouth of Cook Inlet off the Kenai. And also southeast winds, the eastern Aleutians, upwards to 30 to 35 knots. And a quick check of turbulence, surface to 6,000 there, and north, especially of Kodiak Island, surface to 4,000 eastern Aleutians, and the far western Aleutians, surface to 4,000 foot turbulence will be possible. So that's your flight weather. Have a safe flight.
What's up, stars? Trace here. June 20th is the longest day of the year, the summer solstice. I know summer had just started and now it's already half over, but we've got a conjunction of Venus and Pollux this week, so I thought I'd give you an excuse to stop and really take in the sky. First, to celebrate this 2021 solstice, wake up and watch the sunrise. Seriously, go outside before our nearest star breaks the horizon any day this week and observe the changes to the sky as the light slowly obscures stars and changes colors. Later, just after sunset, look west. You'll see Venus near Pollux and Castor, the Gemini twins. On this longest day of the year, take some time to reflect and enjoy the dance of our planet spinning through space. Another solstice gone by. Thank you for watching, stargazers, and keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
We have a lot of pilots. In fact, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft. No. Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets and they're cold and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid. And that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image, this is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer. And in the stratus layer there was a lot of those super cooled liquid drops or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And So the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now this is really cool. It's really cool to be able to identify that. There is, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would happen, sun doesn't shine all the time, unless I guess if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those super cool drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, of course, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
It's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we've had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right?
Yeah, here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at.
Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the show, and now it's time for marine weather. A quick check of today's sea ice edge continues to show a lot of open water developing there through the Bering Strait on up into the Chukchi Sea, and the ice continues to break up further along the northwest coast and the Arctic coast. Still some lingering ice in Kotzebue Sound as well as near northwest of St. Lawrence Island, and as we expect, given we're nearing now just a few days away from the solstice, that we can anticipate with a high sun angle and warmer temperatures, this ice melt will continue, and we'll continue to see open water continue to expand. Well, the marine forecast on Friday for the southeast inner waterways, winds out of the southeast at about 5 to 10 knots, waves 1 to maybe 3 feet. Along the Gulf Coast, winds will be southeasterly 15 knots, swells generally between 5 and 7 feet. On Saturday, the inner waterways will generally keep a southeasterly flow around 5 to 15 knots, waves 2, maybe 3 feet. And then along the Gulf Coast, winds are going to try to turn a little more easterly, 25 knots the south end, 15 knots Sitka northward through Yakutat out toward Cape St. Elias, where swells will generally be 5 to 6 feet, a little higher on the south end, 7 to 8 feet. And then south central areas, look for northeast to east winds. Northeast 10 knots at Prince William Sound, 2-footers. Cook Inlet, northeast to north, 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. And then off the Kenai and Kodiak Island, it winds out of the east-northeast 20 knots, 6 to 7 foot swells. For Saturday, the winds across the North Gulf there will tend to go more easterly at 20 to 25 knots from the mouth of Cook Inlet to just northeast there of Kodiak Island with swells of 5 to 7 feet. Easterly winds 10 knots, 2-foot waves there at Prince William Sound, and northeast to east winds around 10 knots with 2 to 3 foot waves for the northern half of the Cook Inlet. Heading out down along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Friday, there will be some channeling winds there. The Shelikof Strait upwards to 30 knots from the northeast, causing some locally higher seas of 9 feet. Otherwise, 6 to 7 foot swells on the Pacific side, and northeast winds to 20 knots with 2 to 3 foot waves on the Bering side. And then for Saturday, we'll generally see northeasterly winds on the Gulf and North Pacific side. 25 knots, Shelikof Strait, some 9-foot waves. Otherwise, 4 to 5 footers there along the North Pacific side. of the peninsula, and 1 to 2 foot waves with northerly winds at 15 knots on the Bering side. Across the Aleutians, the eastern Aleutians will see winds of 20 to 25 knots, swells of 7 to 9 feet on the Pacific side, 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. Further west, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, and waves around 5 feet west of Adak through Kiska and Shemya. And then for Saturday, winds will be northeast to east across the eastern Aleutians at around 15 to near 20 knots. Waves 5 to 7 feet to the North Pacific side and 3 to 4 feet the Bering side. However, you get west of Adak, easterly winds will be picking upwards to 40-knot gales, especially west of Kiska, where swells could be on the order of 10 to 13 feet. Across the west and southwest coastlines, offshore flow out of the northeast, 15 knots, waves generally 2 to 3 feet. Northerly winds there, Norton Sound, south of St. Lawrence, 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. Northerly winds again for Saturday there at Norton Sound and south of St. Lawrence at around 10 to 15 knots and waves 2 to 3 feet. A little more offshore flow still there off of the Kuskokwim River Delta at about 15 knots and 2 feet. Along the Arctic coast, we are looking for winds out of the east at about 10 to 20 knots, still areas of ice where there is open water, waves a foot or two. And then going down along the northwest coast, south winds 10 to 15 knots, waves a couple of feet with onshore flow to 10 knots and 1 foot waves where there's open water, Kotzebue Sound. And then on Saturday, winds are going to try to turn more northerly across the region, especially Arctic coast at 10 knots. And then north to northwest coming into Kotzebue Sound with waves around 2 feet. Quick check of marine weather map. We have weak low pressure that is toward the south end of the Gulf of Alaska on Friday. Weak low pressure over the northwest interior with weak high pressure southwest St. Lawrence Island. And by Saturday, we'll be watching low pressure there. North Pacific, that's going to be lifting later in the weekend to just east of Kodiak Island, bringing more widespread rain up into southwest and south central areas late in the weekend and early next week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.